Welcome to the Deep Dive podcast channel. Have you ever noticed those moments when your reaction to something feels, well, bigger than what's actually happening? Like a tiny spark sets off a surprisingly large emotional fire.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
a really universal human experience, I think. And often, there's more going on beneath the surface than just, being overly sensitive.
Right. That label isn't always helpful, is it?
Not really.
hmm
So today, we're going to explore the deeper roots of these intense reactions, looking at how our past experiences and maybe some unresolved emotions can really shape how we respond in the present.
It's a fascinating connection.
It really is. So if you've ever felt this way and are curious to understand it better, then you're definitely in the right space. We're about to take a good look under the hood, so to speak. And if exploring the complexities of our inner world resonates with you, please do subscribe so you don't miss our future deep dives.
Yeah, we'd love to have you along.
We really want this to be a space where you feel safe to explore these often vulnerable parts of yourself. Know that you're definitely not alone in these experiences.
It's so important to remember.
And please share any thoughts or questions that come up for you in the comments. Your insights are truly valuable to the conversation.
Definitely.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Sounds good. So when we observe what we might call an overreaction, it's useful to think that it's rarely just about that immediate situation itself.
Right.
Often it's actually a signal that a deeper, perhaps older emotional experience has been, well, touched.
Like poking an old bruise.
Exactly like that. Think of it like this. The current event might just be a gentle tap on a bruise you didn't even realize you still had.
Okay.
So what we see as a disproportionate response is frequently the activation of a defense mechanism, one that learned its patterns a long time ago, probably in a very different context.
That's a really helpful way to frame it, the tap on an old bruise. So if these big reactions are often linked to the past, what's actually going on in our brains when these triggers get activated and lead to such, well, intense feelings?
Well, fundamentally, our brains are wired for safety and survival. That's priority number one.
Makes sense.
So when we encounter something our brain perceives as a threat, and I emphasize perceives a region called the amygdala, kicks in very quickly.
The amygdala, okay, I've heard of that. The sort of fear center.
That's often how it's described, yes. It's a very rapid responder. Now, the amygdala's main job isn't rational analysis. It's about immediate assessment and action. Is this safe? Is it dangerous?
Right. Quick decisions.
Exactly. And what's significant here, particularly for this discussion, is that for individuals who've experienced past trauma or significant emotional distress, the amygdala can become highly sensitive, hypersensitive even.
So it's kind of on high alert.
Precisely. It might start reacting strongly even to situations that aren't objectively dangerous, but maybe they carry just a subtle resemblance to those earlier difficult experiences.
So it's like the brain's threat detection system gets turned up a little too high, maybe, and it starts sounding the alarm even when there isn't a clear and present danger.
That's a very good analogy, yes.
And it definitely feels like when those strong emotions hit, it becomes much harder to think logically. Is there a connection there?
Oh, absolutely. There's a direct link. During these intense emotional states, the prefrontal cortex,
That's the thinking part.
yes, the part of our brain responsible for things like rational thought, planning, impulse control, self-regulation, it tends to become less dominant in its activity.
Oh, okay.
It's not completely offline, but its ability to effectively step in and modulate the emotional response coming from the amygdala is significantly reduced.
Which explains why you can't just think your way out of it sometimes.
Exactly. Simply trying to reason your way out of an intense feeling can be incredibly challenging because the emotional brain has, at least temporarily, taken the lead.
So a key insight here is that when you feel an intense reaction, recognize it might be your ancient threat system firing, not necessarily the logical reality of the moment.
That's a crucial understanding to hold. It shifts the perspective from what's wrong with me to what is my system trying to protect me from.
That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned trauma earlier and how the amygdala can become hypersensitive. How does past trauma specifically contribute to these overreactions we're talking about?
Well, one of the ways trauma can manifest long-term is through what we often refer to as trauma loops.
Trauma loops, okay.
Essentially, the brain, in its attempt to protect us from future harm, which is fundamentally adaptive, can get somewhat stuck in these recurring patterns of threat response.
Like a broken record.
Kinda, yeah. A seemingly minor cue, and it could be anything, really, a particular tone of voice, a specific phrase someone uses, maybe even a subtle facial expression.
Things you might not even consciously notice?
Often, yes. They can unconsciously trigger this whole cascade of reactions as if that past threat were happening right now in the present.
Wow.
The body and mind respond as if the original traumatic event is actually being relived. And that's why the intensity of the reaction can feel so completely out of sync with the current situation. The nervous system is reacting to a past danger that the present moment has somehow echoed.
That's a really valid analogy, the record skipping on a painful track. And I've also heard the term emotional flashbacks. How do those fit into this picture? Are they different from the visual flashbacks we often associate with trauma?
Yes, they are distinct, though related. While visual flashbacks often involve more sensory reliving of a past event sites, sounds, smells, emotional flashbacks are characterized primarily by sudden and intense waves of feeling.
Just the feeling.
Predominantly, yes. Things like overwhelming shame, intense fear, profound sadness, or sometimes even rage. And these feelings seem to arise without a clear, logical trigger in the present moment.
So you might not know why you suddenly feel that way.
Exactly. The crucial difference is that with an emotional flashback, you might not have a specific memory or image of the original event that's causing the feeling right then, but you experience the full emotional weight, the full impact, as if it were happening right now.
So it's feeling the raw emotion without necessarily having a clear narrative or memory attached to it in that instant.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the telltale signs, then, that someone might be experiencing an emotional flashback?
Well, some common indicators include a sudden and intense feeling of self-blame or worthlessness, like you're fundamentally flawed.
Okay.
Also, a sense of feeling very small or helpless or even invisible, like you don't matter. A powerful urge to either withdraw and hide, or conversely, to lash out defensively.
Fight or flight, sort of.
And unexpected surges of sadness or anger that just feel completely disproportionate to whatever just happened. Often, these experiences are closely linked to what we call inner child wounds.
Inner child wounds. Okay, that's another term I've heard. Can you elaborate on what those are and how they connect to these reactions?
Certainly. Think of the inner child not as a literal child inside you, but as a concept representing the emotional experiences, the memories, the beliefs, and the unmet needs of your younger self.
Our past self, emotionally speaking.
Exactly. When our fundamental needs for things like safety, love, attention, belonging, or validation weren't consistently met during our formative years, childhood, adolescence, it can create these emotional wounds, these sensitivities that we carry into adulthood.
Right.
Imagine that younger version of yourself still hold on to those hurts, those feelings of not being safe or not being good enough or being abandoned. And certain situations later in life can, well, poke at those old wounds.
So as adults, when we encounter situations that unconsciously resonate with those early unmet needs.
Precisely. It can activate these deeply held emotional injuries. The feeling comes flooding back.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So for instance, being consistently overlooked in a team meeting as an adult might trigger the old feeling of not being seen or valued by a parent, perhaps.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. Or receiving criticism from a partner, even if it's constructive, might inadvertently tap into those early feelings of being shamed or judged harshly by a caregiver or teacher.
Okay, I see.
Even something seemingly innocuous, like maybe being asked a lot of questions, could potentially feel like being controlled or interrogated, echoing past experiences where maybe you lacked autonomy or felt invaded as a child.
Wow.
And until we begin to acknowledge and consciously work with these inner child wounds, they can continue to unconsciously fuel these intense emotional reactions in our adult lives.
It's remarkable and, yeah, a little sobering, actually, to realize how these early experiences can continue to exert such a strong influence on us, often without us even knowing it.
It's very powerful.
You also mentioned somatic responses earlier, so it's not just in our heads or our emotions. The body gets involved too.
Absolutely. Critically involved. Trauma and unresolved emotional experiences aren't just stored cognitively as memories or beliefs. They also leave a significant imprint on our physical bodies, on our nervous system.
How does that show up?
Well, when a trigger occurs, the body can react very viscerally, often even before our conscious mind has fully processed what's happening. You might notice, for example, your heart rate suddenly spiking,
Yeah, I felt that.
or your muscles tensing up, maybe in your shoulders, jaw, or stomach. Your breathing might become shallow and rapid. Your digestive system might feel like it's shutting down or knotting up. Or you might feel that sudden rush of adrenaline, that heat rising.
That fight or flight feeling.
Exactly. These are all examples of somatic responses, the body's way of preparing for a perceived threat. It's engaging our primal survival responses. Fight, flight, freeze. Or even fawn, which is that people-pleasing tendency to appease the perceived threat.
Fawn. Okay.
Yeah.
That's interesting, too.
It's like your body has its own memory of stressful events, independent of conscious recall sometimes. These are fundamental survival mechanisms that can, in these triggered moments, override our more reasoned and conscious reactions.
So sometimes what looks like an overreaction on the outside might actually be the body's ancient alarm system just going into overdrive based on past programming.
That's a very accurate way to understand it. The body is reacting based on old information about danger.
And when these kinds of intense physical and emotional states become a more frequent or chronic experience, is there a term for that kind of state?
Yes, that can lead to what we call nervous system dysregulation.
Dysregulation.
And
Okay.
someone has experienced prolonged stress, chronic adversity, or has a history of trauma, their nervous system can become habitually biased. It can get stuck either in a state of hyperarousal,
Which feels like.
that's characterized by states of anxiety, restlessness, irritability, being easily startled, maybe panic, feeling wired,
Okay.
or it can get stuck in hyperarousal.
And that's the opposite.
Kind of the other end of the spectrum, yes. That can manifest as feelings of numbness, disconnection, exhaustion, fatigue, feeling shut down or checked out.
Right.
In either of these dysregulated states, the threshold for triggering an intense emotional or physical reaction is often significantly lower. Your window of tolerance for stress shrinks.
So small things set you off more easily.
Exactly. So what might appear as an overreaction externally could actually be a sign of an overwhelmed nervous system that's constantly scanning for danger, even in the absence of an objective threat in the present moment. Chronic overreactions might signal a nervous system stuck in overdrive or shutdown, really highlighting a need for sustained self-care and potentially professional support.
These explanations are really clarifying how all these pieces, the brain, past trauma, the body, the nervous system, fit together.
Yeah.
You gave a few examples earlier, like the rage over forgotten text, perhaps echoing emotional neglect. Could you share maybe just a couple more relatable examples of how these triggers and past experiences might show up in everyday life?
Certainly. Let's think about someone who consistently feels intensely anxious and overwhelmed by even minor changes in their routine or plans.
Okay.
This could potentially stem from a childhood where their environment felt very unpredictable or chaotic, so predictability now feels essential for safety.
Right, that need for control.
Or consider someone who becomes very defensive and maybe shuts down completely when receiving even constructive feedback at work.
Yeah.
This might be rooted in past experiences of harsh criticism, constant judgment, or feeling like they could never measure up, perhaps from a parent or a teacher.
So the feedback feels like a personal attack, even if it's not meant that way.
Precisely. It reactivates that old wound. Even something like, say, a strong emotional reaction, maybe intense sadness or anger when someone cancels plans at the last minute.
Oh, yeah, that can sting.
It can. And while disappointment is normal, an overwhelming reaction could potentially be linked to past experiences of abandonment or feeling unimportant or being let down repeatedly. These seemingly small reactions often have deeper roots in our personal histories.
It's almost as if our bodies and our emotions are carrying this silent narrative of our past experiences. And that narrative influences how we interpret and react to the present.
That's a beautiful way to put it, a silent narrative.
So, with this understanding, what's a crucial first step we can take towards shifting from those automatic, sometimes overwhelming reactions to maybe a more thoughtful and regulated response?
Well, the initial and really ongoing step is cultivating self-awareness. It sounds simple, but it's profound.
Just noticing.
Just noticing, yes. Starting to notice when your emotional reactions feel disproportionate to what's happening in the here and now. The aim isn't to judge yourself or suppress your feelings. Remember, all emotions carry valuable information.
Right, they're telling us something.
They are. But the goal is to develop the capacity to pause, even for a split second, and recognize that the intensity of your response might have its origins in the past, not just the present trigger.
Creating a little space.
Exactly. Simple practices like taking just a few slow, deep breaths can create that moment of space. Consciously naming the emotion you're experiencing. Okay, I'm feeling really angry right now. Or, wow, there's a lot of fear here. A technique we often call name it to tame it.
Name it to tame it. I like that.
It can actually help to reduce the intensity just by acknowledging it. And grounding techniques can be incredibly helpful too.
Like what?
Things like really feeling your feet on the floor, noticing the physical sensations in your body, the chair supporting you, the air temperature, or deliberately noticing details in your immediate surroundings, naming 5 things you see, 4 things you hear. These help bring you back to the safety of the present moment when you feel overwhelmed by the past.
So it's about creating that little bit of distance, that pause between the initial trigger and our immediate response, giving ourselves a chance to check in with what's really going on inside.
That's the essence of it, yes.
Right.
Moving from reaction to reflection.
And you mentioned approaching our triggers with curiosity rather than self-judgment. How can we practically do that? Because it's easy to beat ourselves up.
It really is. Our default is often self-criticism. So instead of getting frustrated with yourself and thinking, oh, why am I overreacting again? I shouldn't feel this way. Try consciously to shift to a stance of gentle curiosity, like you're an explorer of your own inner world.
Okay, like an inner detective.
Sort of. Ask yourself questions like, what does this situation or this feeling remind me of? Or when else in my life have I felt something similar to this? Or even, what part of me feels like it needs to be protected right now?
Those are powerful questions.
They can be. When we approach our triggers with this kind of open and non-critical inquiry, they can actually become really valuable sources of information. They start pointing us towards those unhealed aspects of ourselves, the parts that are seeking attention, understanding, and care.
So triggers aren't just problems, they can be messengers.
Exactly. Messengers pointing towards where the healing needs to happen.
That's a really powerful reframe, seeing triggers not as enemies to be suppressed, but as messengers offering insights. And if these intense reactions are so deeply connected to past experiences, sometimes involving trauma, are there specific therapeutic approaches that are known to be particularly helpful in addressing them?
Yes, absolutely. Fortunately, there are several trauma-informed therapy approaches that can be very effective because they specifically address these deeper roots.
Yeah.
For instance, internal family systems, often just called IFS,
IFS, yeah.
focuses on understanding and compassionately working with the different parts within ourselves, including those wounded inner child parts we discussed earlier, helping them heal and integrate.
Working with the different parts of you.
Yes. Then there's somatic experiencing, or SE. This is a body-centered therapy that helps individuals gently track their physical sensations and release stored trauma and tension held within the nervous system and the body itself.
So really focusing on the body's role.
Very much so. EMDR, which stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is another well-known and powerful technique. It helps the brain reprocess traumatic memories and reduce their ongoing emotional charge and impact.
I've heard a lot about EMDR.
And also sensory motor psychotherapy, which skillfully integrates body awareness, movement, and mindfulness into the therapeutic process to help address the physical, the somatic manifestations of trauma and attachment issues.
So lots of options that really tackle this mind-body connection.
Exactly. These approaches, and others like them, all recognize the deep and interconnected nature of our past experiences, our current emotions, our thoughts, and our physical sensations. They aim to facilitate healing on multiple levels, not just cognitively.
That sounds incredibly hopeful, knowing there are ways to work directly with these deep patterns. And for those listening who are looking for practical tools they can maybe start incorporating into their daily lives right now to build greater self-awareness and emotional resilience, what kinds of practices would you recommend?
There are definitely several accessible and impactful tools people can experiment with. Starting your day, perhaps, with just a brief self-check-in. Taking a minute or two to consciously ask yourself, how am I truly feeling right now, physically and emotionally? And what might I need today to support myself? That alone builds self-awareness.
Just pausing to ask.
Just pausing. Another helpful tool can be keeping a trigger journal. It doesn't have to be elaborate. Just noting down, maybe later in the day, situations that triggered a strong reaction, the specific emotions you felt, and any related thoughts, memories, or physical sensations that came up. Over time, this can help you identify recurring patterns.
Seeing the connections.
Yes. Also engaging in mindful movement practices. This could be gentle yoga or tai chi, dancing, even just taking a conscious walk where you pay attention to your body moving. These can help to release pent-up nervous energy and promote a greater sense of embodiment and grounding.
Getting out of your head and into your body.
Precisely. Practicing affirmations that reinforce safety and the present moment can also be useful, especially during or after a trigger. Simple phrases like, I am safe right now, or this feeling is intense but it's temporary, or this is the past and I am okay in this moment. Repeating those can help reassure your nervous system.
Kind messages to yourself.
Kind and grounding messages, yes. Learning to establish healthy boundaries is also crucial. Practicing saying no to things that feel overwhelming or draining and honoring your own needs and limits is fundamental for protecting your emotional well-being and preventing overwhelm.
That's a big one for many people.
It really is. And finally, don't underestimate the power of co-regulation. Intentionally connecting with safe, calm, and supportive people, friends, family, partners, therapists, can have a profoundly calming effect on a dysregulated nervous system. Our nervous systems are designed to attune to others.
We regulate each other.
We do.
Yeah.
So seeking out those safe connections is a vital resource. These consistent practices, layered over time, can gradually cultivate a deeper sense of inner safety and build a really solid foundation for lasting emotional resilience.
These are all incredibly valuable insights and really practical tools that people can start to explore and use. It truly emphasizes that these intense reactions aren't signs of personal weakness or just being too sensitive, but often have very real, understandable roots in our past experiences and how our nervous systems adapted.
Exactly. It's about biology and history, not character flaws.
Right. So as we bring this deep dive to a close, what would be the most important takeaway, the key message you'd want our listeners to remember from our conversation today?
I think the most crucial thing to hold on to is this. When you find yourself having a reaction that feels out of proportion, bigger than the current situation seems to warrant, it's highly likely that it's not solely about what's happening right now in this moment.
It's got echoes.
It's got echoes, exactly. More often than not, these intense responses are echoes of unhealed experiences, unaddressed needs, or unresolved emotions from your past that are still held, still living within your nervous system, and they're seeking acknowledgement and resolution.
Seeking healing.
Yes. And healing these patterns isn't about trying to suppress your feelings or judge yourself harshly for having them. Instead, the path forward involves approaching yourself with kindness, with compassion, and with genuine curiosity. It's about exploring the why behind your triggers, understanding their origins, and gently, patiently tending to those underlying emotional wounds that are asking for your attention.
That's such a compassionate and ultimately hopeful perspective. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and guiding us through this today. It's been really illuminating.
It's been my pleasure. It's important work.
I know I've certainly gained some valuable insights, and I really hope our listeners have as well. We're genuinely interested in hearing your thoughts, your reflections, any aha moments you might have had during this discussion. So please do feel free to share them in the comments below. We learned so much from your experiences too.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We look forward to exploring more fascinating aspects of the human experience with you in our future discussions.
Looking forward to it.
Until next time, take care.